All right. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer, and it's in His name, which is His authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Amen. Amen. How's everybody doing? Hopefully, all are doing well. Thank you for being on with us one more again as we continue to go through our daily, weekly goals and our talks, conversations, etc. Thank you so much for being on, everybody. And I'm going to continue to go through some things. As always, we give all praise to the Most High, Yahweh Elohim. And I'm Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being the voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. And just going to have our short evening live as we get ready for class. So we'll probably be done around 8:30 p.m. Eastern New York time, somewhere around there. And hopefully you all are doing well. If there's any, we give all honor and praise to the Most High for my wife, the Honorable Amma, who lives a life that's able to be honored. You can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish, and see what she has to do as far see what her business is as far as natural medicine and the things that she's doing to be able to teach us to be greater. And so shalom to everybody. Welcome again. Thanks for being on if you're on TikTok, YouTube. How you doing, Sister Deborah? How you doing? Butterfly Effect. Everybody who's on, if I didn't catch your name, how you doing, Brother Anthony? And today I'd like to introduce to you a book. I guess let me switch. I gotta flip the screen. Hold on. Or mirror the screen for you guys. If you're on TikTok, there you go. We have this book called Rome. This book is a picture book mostly. It's based off of a HBO series that was done a while back. I wanted to use some of the stuff because I talk about a lot of different things when we're dealing with Rome. And, I want to make sure that, we kind of maybe show you a few things having to do with it. Hey, how you doing? Memphis in the house. Okay. Tennessee in the house. Great to have you in. So since we talk a lot about romantic things and things of that nature, even though it's based off a television series, it was on HBO a long time ago, there are some things that I want you to visually see. And I felt it would be great to share with you. How you doing, Sister Reese? How you doing, Sister Beverly? I sent Sister Barbara some pictures, so some videos of when we got together, just a few of them. I need to get some more together, but hopefully you get a chance to see those. So, and how you doing, Sister Dawn? So yeah, so we're talking about Rome, and it has a lot of different things. You'll see a map on here that has different things, the way that it was seen in Rome at the time, right? You see Crete, you see, Africa Minor, right? Africa Minor, which is just basically talking about, I guess, the position of it. They didn't really go too deep into Africa, but things of that nature. You'll see a lot of different things having to do with where things are supposed to be on here. Those are things that will be in the opening. And like I said, even though it's a book that is based off of a television series. How you doing, Jacob? Hopefully everything's going well. Check on you a little bit. How you doing, Sister Barbara? I felt, there are some things in here that kind of show a lot of different things that we talk about. And I'm sorry, on YouTube it looks one way, on TikTok it looks another. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of this until I can get it together. But you see certain things that you'll constantly see over and over and over again. Like this right here. This is where we see parades. Now, a lot of people don't know where you get your parades from. So I talk about that often. But you'll see here they're trying to do something representing the parade. Here you see the eagle, right, which is extremely important for them. If they went to battle, like this is their standard, the flag, etc. If the eagle went down in battle, it was a huge deal. Matter of fact, one of the most embarrassing losses in Roman history is when there was a battle that happened with the Gauls, and the Gauls tore them up pretty bad, and the eagle was actually taken, as well as everybody being killed off. But here you'll see a parade, and you'll see Caesar dressed a certain way. You see his face even being red, or really what we would call purple back then. And you're only allowed to do this at certain times. Matter of fact, actually, I'm sorry, I kind of have this in the wrong place. See the movie. See, once again, it's like a episode. They kind of change stuff up, so we got to be careful. Excuse me. This isn't the parade. We'll look at the parade a little bit later. But here is where Caesar, if you see it, you'll see that Caesar, they have like a a crown basically above his head. Sorry, the lighting is bad. You'll see like a crown is basically above his head. They weren't supposed to have a king in Rome, and so they had the issue with Caesar because Caesar kept trying to play with trying to be, a king. They didn't want kings, but Caesar basically had power and lived as a king. Basically, his adopted son would end up being the first king, anyways. So they didn't really do much when they killed him off. But Caesar was a very polarizing figure. The people really liked him, and people liked the fact he was getting land for him, but they didn't like the fact that he was taking power away from the other elites. And that's really how this stuff goes, right? When even the Senate, like we have a Senate today, it's people who hold not just a lot of rank, but it's people who hold a lot of money in comparison to everybody else, and they fight amongst each other. They used to get people to fight in the streets for them, just like you have Proud Boys and different people that do that now. You have different militia that do that now for Democrats and Republicans. They did the same thing back then. And so just kind of want to show you some things so you can see it a little more. When I mention some of these things, you'll be able to see what I'm saying. How you doing, Jermaine 9, if I said that correctly. Thanks for being part of the community. How you doing, Sir Stephen? So here, this right here is showing a battle, depicting a battle that happened between the Romans and the Gauls. So the Gauls are French, by the way, mostly, right? Eventually, they would be executed and killed off with some other tribes that were there as well. But the Gauls are basically French. And so you see Romans against French here. So Italy against France, Italy against Normandy and France, if you will, later on. But Rome against the French. And you'll see all types of stuff going on really here. But this was very violent times, obviously. And the Gauls eventually would kind of bow down and become more Roman, which is why French are very romantic, right? Just like you are very romantic at times. You'll have the French that are very romantic. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How you doing, Sister Austria? How you doing, Mayhew? So you have a lot of this stuff going on. So the Romans basically beat the French into submission, where the French would eventually start acting Roman, learning Roman, trying to go to Roman schools. The Gaul elite was try to start acting Roman, etc. How you doing, Sister Carrie? So these are things that you can just see, right? This is supposed to be Caesar here. This is supposed to be Vercingetorix over here. This guy right here is supposed to be Caesar over here. Vercingetorix is somebody who was supposed to be leading the Gauls. He was actually somebody who was taught to be like a great Roman, and he ended up, behind the scenes helping them to come against Rome, and had his people actually listened. And had they been a little more skilled, they probably would have beat the Romans, but Caesar was able to outlast them. And therefore, Vercingetorix ended up having to turn himself in. So many different things. Here, so I want to show you guys this right here. Now in the TV series, this is them basically trying to make Julius Caesar look bad. But if you notice, you'll see that all these Romans over here, or all these senators are wearing, all these senators that you see, they're wearing white robes with these purple stripes, right? Purple was supposed to be a no-no because they weren't supposed to be kings. But what they would do is the Senate would wear purple stripes. That way the people saw they were above them, but saw that they were not quite trying to be kings. You could only wear full purple when you had a parade for yourself, when you had a triumph. When you had a triumph, that meant that you were a victor. You had killed off your victims. You had committed genocide, and you were going to parade them, as well as a lot of wow. You were going to parade them, as well as a lot of different things to explain what your victory was about and all that stuff. You were going to parade them through the streets, and you were going to kill off the leader of who you killed, right? And you had these senators who, one of the senators usually would have been the ones that was at war. They would have killed somebody off, and they would have got a parade. Kind of sort of what happens today, where somebody does something, we all go, oh, wow, look at what they did. And then we parade them across. Really all they've done is commit genocide. They've killed people off or done something crazy along those lines, right? So when you see this thing and people try to dress like this, and they talk about a toga, and they talk about Rome being about the people and all that, the people didn't get to wear stuff like this. The people didn't get to wear purple, right? Because if you wore purple, it meant you were high ranking. So as much as they said there were no kings and queens, there were kings and queens. Just like today in capitalism, you must comprehend that in capitalism, he or she that has capital is your king or queen. Capitalism, by definition, is a system in which politics and economics are used to control trade and industry. Trade and industry is wielded by the government. I'm sorry, excuse me, wrong. That capitalism is defined as a system in which politics and economics are used to control trade and industry. Trade and industry is wielded by the private corporations and not the government. So the people aren't even in the definition of capitalism. The people are supposed to be governed by the government, but the government is supposed to be governed by private corporations. That's what the Senate does. So we have a lot of people who talk about Senate and all these different things or whatever. They're telling you, make sure that you're into politics and things of that nature. And a lot of us have no clue as to how politics actually work. All right. Here's another one I wanted to share with you guys. This is a picture. This is supposed to depict Julius Caesar going across the Rubicon. The Rubicon was a specific river. And that river, if you went across it, basically you were going outside of just the territory they had when they were beating up the Gauls, and you were going into Germanic territories. Caesar was dealing with Germanic people who had big armies and stuff as well, who were trying basically to come into Gaul and take over Gaul. Right. So when you hear the Germans and you hear like about the Gauls and you hear people trying to say Vercingetorix is Gallic or things like that, if you even know the person I'm talking about, that's not right, because the Gauls were basically who we call the French, Normandy, France, stuff like that. You had the Germans. And the Germans tried to come over, sometimes even trying to escape bad kings, but sometimes the kings would come themselves, try to cross this Rubicon and try to take over the Gauls. The Romans had a problem with this, and so Julius Caesar actually crossed the Rubicon looking to see about going to see the Gauls, right? And I'm sorry, trying to fight the Germans. And some of the Germans said, hey, we want to be with you. We're tired of the stuff, whatever. And they basically either killed them off or turned them away, which he got flack from his own people for committing genocide, right? Killing off these Germans, some of them in which were women and children just trying to get away from a bad situation. So Caesar was looked down upon, even though many people had done what Caesar did, but Caesar was looked down upon by this. So we have genocide that's happening all the time. That's what we're dealing in, is basically genocide. They don't really show it in this picture, but they have, I guess this is part one of the episodes. It talks about stealing from Saturn. I just wanted to mention that because one of the things that they used to do, and this is something that Catherine the Great in Russia did as well. This is something that obviously King Henry VIII of England would later do. It's something that that the United States of America has done. It's something that's done all over the world, right? But basically, the Romans, money ruled everything, especially because you had to pay off soldiers in order to make sure that your people were doing well, right? Or to make sure that you kept power. And so even though they don't really show the temple, they would actually sometimes, there's even historical documentation. How you doing, Sister Reese? Thanks for the love. There's documentation that shows that they would actually go into their temples and they would actually steal the gold. That was where their treasury was. They actually kept the treasury at the temple, right? So in their belief system and their gods and structure and all that, the gods were supposed to be the ones that had the money, and they protected the temples, not just because of the gods, but also because the treasury was there. And some people, though, including this person wasn't Julius Caesar, but including Julius Caesar and others themselves, they would just sometimes come in and just steal the money. And that was it. All right. Trying to look for some different things to get through. Of course, one of the things that's not talked about a lot, but just like today, a lot of sexual things going on. It's supposed to depict Caesar right here. And as Caesar's being depicted, you will see right here that you're dealing with a sex act in the background. I won't leave it up too long, just in case we get some guideline violations or somebody tries to report us. All right. Oh, no, Boss Ken, we're on 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. We're on 8 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. I take Wednesdays off. Right. But you can see these things happening all together. Right. Let's see. Okay. If you notice in all this, I was telling my wife this, if you notice this in the show, in the other shows that happened, what they had to show about the gladiator, I'm forgetting his name right now, but the gladiator who, fought against the Roman Empire and almost won. His name, if it's necessary, it'll pop into my head. But if you notice in all these things, they're not really going to show you Roman poverty, right? It's very romantic to not show Roman poverty and all these things going on. You're not really seeing the impoverished. If you see the impoverished, you'll see them as slaves, but even they are supposed to be dressed up some or whatever. And you'll see that's kind of the only black people you see in these series too, or people of color. Don't forget at this time, Romans don't necessarily mean white. Over time, later on in history, the social construct of white or the social construct of somebody darker than you being bad happens, and it really doesn't really take place in an extreme manner the way that it is now until the Crusades, and then it really picks up, obviously during chattel slavery, which is not too far around after the Crusades, because we always think about chattel slavery as um, Civil War times, but the chattel slavery really, could remember the world is great, is bigger than just what, the earth is just bigger than the United States of America, right? So you really don't deal with chattel slavery until or well, chattel slavery really starts basically as far as Spain getting into it, which is one of the big jump offs on it, but like you really don't deal with it until about the late 1400s. So it's been around for a while, but even before then you had some. But here Rome would have looked very different. There would have been more colors. So you got to comprehend there's a spirit of Rome. Now don't just think of the physics of Rome, the physical Rome, right? But a lot of these people now, just like they do with African heroes, any heroes are basically going to try to be made as white as possible. I mean, heck, you got The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. You got the Last of the Mohicans, that was supposed to be a white guy. You got a lot of Last this, Last that, or whatever. They're all supposed to be white people because that's who your heroes are supposed to be. So you have a lot of different things happening here. This is something that happened with now we go into some weird stuff. Let me just double check, make sure I got the right person. Hold on one second. Okay, so I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this. So now this is how even they want, you have to see even how they depict Rome and how they depict you, because this right here is supposed to be you, this little white boy. What do I mean by that? This is supposed to be Ptolemy. Now Ptolemy, we have to understand, Kemet was no longer on the throne. Cush had tried to hold the throne from Greece for the Macedonians, but couldn't because Kemet had wilded out a little too much and put themselves too far out of play. So Kemet basically was out of the picture and were enslaved. Cush was doing his best to make sure that they could hold the fort for themselves, right? And so now you have the Greeks that have been here since Alexander. Then Alexander dies. His kingdom was split up into four. After his kingdom was split up into four, you have Ptolemy. Ptolemy, there's a whole bunch of Ptolemies that sit on the throne. Now, these Ptolemies that they don't want you to know, one thing, like, so Cleopatra comes out of Ptolemy. Cleopatra will be, this is her little brother. He will ultimately be killed. And then his sister, who was trying to sit on the throne with him at the same time, she'll be taken as a triumph and put in one of these parades when Caesar parades people around, and they'll try to see if they want to kill her or not in front of the people. Cleopatra will be the one that Caesar, who has this little fling with, she'll get pregnant with this child. And basically that's who Cleopatra is. She's a Greek woman. However, Greek, you have to remember, Greeks don't necessarily mean white. So even though they show you white here, right, and try to give you some weird representation of what he would have been wearing, he probably would have been a person of color, but he just would not have been African. He would not have been Kemetic. Okay, so so here with Ptolemy, he'll be killed, right? But Caesar here, this is even showing how barbaric things were. Ptolemy and them knew what was going on with Caesar. This is supposed to be the head of somebody called Pompey. Pompey, all right? And I won't leave that up too much because once again, I don't want to get violations on here, but Pompey, basically, Pompey was somebody who had messed with, who had basically been fighting against Caesar. Caesar and Pompey were actually part of something called a triumvirate. There were three of them that were together that's supposed to work together, and him and Pompey were always friends. Pompey had actually married his sister, and his sister died. And once his sister died, him and Caesar started kind of going at it like real tough. And Caesar, actually, it says, it's written that when Caesar saw Pompey's head, he cried. Now, it's for one of two reasons. You believe which one you want. But apparently, Caesar cried when he saw it. He asked for the head to be taken away. It's either A, because him and Pompey were friends for a long time, and he was family, and therefore he looked at his, what he considered to be family dead, and at the head of his family member, or number two, option B, he basically was kind of frustrated and upset he didn't get a chance to make sure that he brought Pompey in and could parade him around Rome to show everybody how much power he had. So you got a lot of different things going on, right? So once we finish with that, now you start getting into them trying to show you a captive queen, right? Trying to show you Cleopatra. Now, once again, Cleopatra would have looked like bare minimum person of color. Remember, Greek didn't mean white at the time, right? But this is supposedly supposed to be Cleopatra. Now, when they say a captive queen, this was what was going on when Caesar met. A lot of people don't know this, when Caesar got there. Basically, Cleopatra, the Ptolemy, who we showed, and their sister had lost their father. Their father had died. In the father's will, because the father was trying to do everything he could to make sure that the land stayed in Greek hands, he was giving tribute or payments. Basically, he was bribing Rome, and he was bribing Caesar specifically, and was like, he was bribing Rome. And so he was saying, hey, leave us alone, this and that. In his will, he gave Rome the right to basically look after, or basically be over, Greece, as long as be over Kemet, as long as they were going to leave Rome alone. He gave Rome the right to be over Kemet as long as they would let Kemet be, have rulership. They would make sure they kept paying Rome. So Caesar, who's been fighting for years now and is getting closer to finally having all the power for himself, he comes over to Kemet and basically is like, yo, run them pockets, right? Like basically he came over initially to be like, yo, give me your money. This young Ptolemy, right? This person that they tried to tell you was Ptolemy over here, the little white boy. They basically tried to say, Ptolemy was on the throne. Now the father had left in his will that Ptolemy, the little white boy, and his sister Cleopatra were supposed to have equal rule, right? They were supposed to have equal rule over Rome. Equal rule over Kemet. However, the people who were in a position, who were high ranking, they wanted to have more control. So they wanted the little boy to be on the throne so they could control him. And they kind of did a misogynist thing. We're talking about Greek, not real Kemet people. There's your Greek people that are over Kemet, right? So they kind of go into, we want a boy to be over instead of a woman, and we want to make sure that we can control him too. Real talk. And thanks for being part of the community, Lemongrass. So basically, you have a situation where Cleopatra, who's supposed to be having equal rulership, doesn't get it. She actually finds a way to sneak herself into a palace that Caesar's in. Ptolemy, the little boy, and others are now fighting against Caesar. And Caesar doesn't really have the power that he needs to fight. He finally eventually wins, but he doesn't. So basically, Caesar ends up making a pact with Cleopatra and says, Cleopatra, since that's what the will said, he's like, y'all won't let Cleopatra rule. I'm saying, as far as Rome, since we're supposed to be over you guys, we're going to say Cleopatra should rule since you tried to kick her out. They fight. Ultimately, Cleopatra's brother Ptolemy dies. Cleopatra gets power. Her and Caesar end up having a child together. When Caesar goes back over, he takes Cleopatra's sister, who was somebody who, when her little brother actually was not able to rule, Cleopatra's sister was actually going against Cleopatra to try and get rulership from them. So it's a lot of different stuff that's going on in here. So, that's why they love to make these shows. There's enough drama in here if you tell the truth. They messing with the truth. If you just tell the truth about what's going on, you got a lot of different things that are going on, right? So let's see. I'm trying to see something. Okay, here we go. So here we go. Right here. So you guys have heard me talk about the parade and the triumph and all these different things. Here's your parade. Here's your triumph. This is where you get your parades from. When you go to see a parade, this is what it comes from. It's very romantic, right? And you would march. Now, once again, remember, all these pictures, they're not really showing you poor people. They're not showing you how poor people live. Like, that's why people like candlelit dinners. Like, people had candlelit dinners because they couldn't afford, they didn't even have places where they could light up the place. A lot of them lived in caves. A lot of them, that was their apartments, right? Some of them lived in huts, things like that. So they won't really show that because that's not something that you're supposed to think of when you think of Rome. Just like in America, you got Skid Row. In America, you got MLK everywhere. In America, you got Southeast DC. In America, you got Southside Chicago. In America, you got, you got trailer parks. In America, you got, some of the worst places in Texas, some of the worst places in the bayou, et cetera, right? But we're not supposed to show those things, because if we show those things, we have to admit that something's off, right? But here you have a parade, and the parade is called a triumph. What would happen in a triumph is that, see, Caesar is the general. At this point, he's basically becoming outright the ruler, and he actually had 4 triumphs in one. You were only supposed to get one at a time, but he had been actually an enemy of the state because the other senators didn't like that he had more power than them. And so they were trying to kill him off. He finally killed off and beat everybody down to where all of his oppressors either got killed, had to be shunned, had to try and start over to get armies together, or basically had to bow down for a season, right? But he basically comes back, and you see, once again, he was, like I was saying, he's wearing the color purple. Now, remember, they weren't supposed to have kings. Only kings wore purple, but these senators would wear a purple strip to let you know that they weren't quite kings, but they were better than you. Thank you for the love, right? Here's Caesar, and Caesar's getting ready to come in front of all these people and have his triumph. He's going to be lauded. Now, in this day, you get treated like Jupiter, the god, the deist, right? So you get to be treated like Jupiter, right? That's what this purple really represents. And you can only wear purple on this day or when you have triumph. Now, Caesar had started building a throne to himself. He had started wearing purple anyways. He had started basically, he had a throne he put in the middle of the Senate, right? In the middle of the Senate floor, he had a throne, right? And you would have the 2 people that were supposed to be leading, right? Right. I don't know if you call them consuls. I think it was the 2 consuls, but in between the 2 consuls, he had a big old throne, right? But here he is having a triumph, and in the triumph, you would parade. When it says you parade people, a parade of people, you would have all these people show up. They would have all these false things that would happen. They would have all these, terrible things as far as how they made victims out of people and committed genocide. And then these would be the victors. And the Romans would actually sing really nasty and disgusting songs. They would sing songs talking about how they needed sex, how they were here to take your women, how they were here to take your gold, how they were here to drink and get drunk. And the people would laugh and appreciate it, but they knew there was a mindset back then that, hey, some of these guys have been away from their families 14, 15 years, 20 years. A lot of these guys come back home, and have children that they obviously couldn't have had because these are newborn babies, right? But that's how it went. So while they were out, they were going wild out. When they were gone, their people go wild out. And for those of us who've been in the United States military, we know how that works. If you were in the military, I'm here to tell you that there's a lot of different things like that went on quite a bit. Somebody leaves, somebody goes on deployment, and hey, a lot of different things that might go into being, right? But if you're going to have somebody away from their family, that's kind of what happens. But once again, that's a very romantic thing, right? A lot of men around a lot of men. They aren't getting to see women. They aren't getting to be around women. Some suspect stuff might happen. I'm not saying always happen. I'm not saying everybody that was in the service that happened, but it might always happen. Real quick, they got a little bit of gladiatorial stuff in here, even though this is more so dealing with a specific person, but they got a little bit of gladiatorial games in here. So real quick, gladiators, this was the NBA. Now, gladiators didn't die as often as what we know from these movies and stuff. They actually got to live a lot more than what we think. But a lot of gladiators bought their freedom. Some of them wouldn't want their freedom, or so a lot of them made enough to buy their freedom, be free. Some of them would get free and then go right back into being gladiators because they liked being around the crowd, things of that nature. They like the notoriety. There are a lot of people that would actually have rooms in their apartments and in their homes and things, and they would have, just like people have posters of LeBron James and something like that nowadays. People would have carvings of their favorite gladiators. Okay, but they didn't die as often as you might think. But it was about what? It was about entertainment. A lot of them died, right? But it was about what? Entertainment. And so it was a sport. People loved the sport. There were even chariot games, right? Formula One, NASCAR, all that stuff that's around now. That's old. That's ancient. That's romantic. That's not new, right? We might think it's new. That's not new. Let me see. I know we're over our time, so I'm trying to see if we're. What do we want to do? Okay. So basically, the Ides of March, Caesar was killed. Caesar was killed by people in the Senate, right? So you shouldn't find it at all confusing if people in the Senate get torn up in public or they get messed over or Republican versus Democrat. If you willing to kill the person who's the leader of your country in front of everybody and then had the nerve to have a funeral about him, then, don't be surprised when stuff like that happens. And that's just season 1 of this show, right? Season 2 basically starts off with his funeral, which would have been a huge deal. By the way, they made him a deity. They made him a god. So after Caesar died, after they killed him, then he was voted in to be a god. See how you got to be careful how people worship and we don't even recognize. So Caesar is considered to be a god, just like all these other gods. And that's why all of the Caesars after him would be named Caesar, starting with his son. And by the way, even the funeral is very interesting because the way the funeral goes, they would actually hire people to cry out at the funeral. They do that in Africa too. It's actually a very African thing to do. And that's why a lot of people wail and do all this stuff. But you would actually hire people to cry and to do stuff, even if they were strangers. They do it in Asia. In a lot of places where they would hire people to do all these things and to die, etc. Right? Let me see. We're running out of time. I'm looking for something specific. Some of this stuff you wouldn't really be able to comprehend without me going over it. So I'm just trying to show certain things. So when you hear me mentioning things, you'll have a reference point in your mind. Well, here's one of the things as far as, I'm sorry. So remember how I said, believe, and it's kind of sort of right in all honesty, but they're going to always depict the Greeks as white people, even though they were people of color. But they're not going to tell you that the Kemetic people were around. Here they will say, okay, yeah, Kemetic people were around. We'll just only show them as if they're slaves. It was Spartacus. That was the name I was trying to say earlier. Spartacus is not in this time frame of what I'm talking about, or what this book is talking about. But yeah, Spartacus was who I was trying to talk about earlier, as somebody who almost took over Rome. So yeah, right. And that was something to where it made them look back, because Rome, just like a lot of cultures, for example, the Spartans, a lot of people don't know Rome and the Spartans were close in this regard. Even though they didn't have power at the same time, by the time Rome really was a world power, the Spartans were kind of looked at as a backwards people. They had at this point like a lot of incest and were looking crazy. So the Spartans kind of were unceremoniously out again. So this is based off of an old HBO series called Rome. So if you look it up, it's an old ancient HBO's, not ancient, an old series called Rome, based off of ancient Rome, but really focusing in on basically Julius Caesar, right when he's starting to get a lot of power with the Gauls, defeats Vercingetorix, him dying in season 1, and season 2 starts going into all these other offshoots. But there's a lot of our story, there's a lot of our people that are here, that are around, that go into these things. Yeah, that might be all we have. So here's Octavian. A lot of people don't know Octavian, who was really Octavius. He actually named himself, basically, he was Julius Caesar Jr., Julius Caesar II. He was an adopted son. Julius Caesar not only had his wife and had other concubines, some of them being boys, if we be honest. Sometimes he was the feminine person in the relationship. He was even made fun of by certain people because he was the feminine person. They didn't care if you were having sex with men or little boys and stuff. They just cared that if you were the male or the female, so to speak. So, but Julius Caesar basically was killed. His son Octavian, or Octavius, who we call Octavius or Octavian now, he wasn't known as Octavian back then. That's something historians have done, because he basically called himself Julius Caesar Jr. And so it's kind of hard to deal with history if you don't know who he is. A lot of people hear Julius Caesar sometimes and not know that it's talking about his son, but this was not his, at least so we think, this was not his actual son. This was his adopted son. He adopted him legally in his will. So when Julius Caesar was killed, they were thinking, oh, okay, Mark Antony probably is going to get his money, or somebody from the triumvirate, or he's going to give his money to the people, which he did. He actually declared that a whole bunch of his money was supposed to go to the people, and to his army. Because whoever was coming after him needed an army, so you always make sure the army's paid. And the army, because they were paid and because they were faithful to Julius Caesar, who kept making sure they got paid and got victories, they were faithful to his adopted son. It was a surprise. This was Octavian, who basically overnight, when Julius Caesar was killed and they looked at his will, he basically overnight became the richest man, one of the richest men to ever live as far as Rome is concerned. So basically overnight, he was really he was already somebody who was there, right? So now he has to end up fighting Mark Antony, because Mark Antony was mad. He thought he was going to get all Julius Caesar's money and stuff. Matter of fact, Julius Caesar's wife had told Mark Antony it was okay for him to start taking some of Julius Caesar's stuff. So she thought if anybody was going to get the stuff, it was going to be Mark Antony too, and Mark Antony would take care of her. Because Mark Antony, even though Mark Antony was kind of a dope in real life, Mark Antony caused a lot of trouble and caused a lot of stuff to happen. And Julius Caesar actually took away Mark Antony's power for a while and gave it to other people. And when one of the people who was supposed to be under him finally thought Julius Caesar was doing too much, he left. And then he had to kind of come back to Mark Antony and be like, okay, I'm going to trust you again because I ain't really got nobody else to trust. So Mark Antony thought he was going to be the one to get it. He didn't get it. And so you had a fight in between him, Mark Antony, and there was a new triumvirate. Just like Caesar had a triumvirate with Pompey and somebody else, Mark Antony, this Julius Caesar Jr., and someone else had a triumvirate that was three people coming together, working together. And they actually did something that we don't know the word prescription. Remember, I was talking about this the other day when people don't really know what prescription means. Prescription, or to prescribe, literally meant that these three got together in this group they had, and they actually, to prescribe, they actually said, okay, cool, we're going to come together, but I don't like this person in power is messing up, I want them kicked out or I want them killed. Somebody else would say, okay, cool, well, I want this person kicked out or killed. The other person, I want this person kicked out or killed. They called that prescription. They called that prescribe, right? So if you were prescribing or having a prescription of somebody, that's what you were doing. In essence, you were deciding who was going to get kicked out, right? Who was going to get kicked out. That's what you were deciding. You were having a conversation on who was going to get kicked out of what. So, yeah, there's a whole lot we can go through on these. But if you notice, once again, they show you a lot of the lavish things in Rome, right? They don't really talk about a lot of the different things. They don't talk about the fact that the soldiers were allowed to rape women and do things like that. They're not going to talk about a lot of different things that they allowed to happen, right? So we have to be aware of these things that are going on, and we have to check on these things that are going on. And we have to look at it. But this, once again, and if you go to see it, once again, this is based off of a television show. So not everything in the television show is real, but I think it's a great way. This book, at least, is something that I like. It's based off of just somebody showing you how they put the stuff together, / what is the story about, a reminder. And it's some nice pictures, if you want to see some things of how the Roman elite lived. There's some, as there's tendency with anything that's in a story. How you doing, Sister Marion? Anything that's a story, there's a tendency for them to go overboard, or to, act like certain things that happen that shouldn't be happening, or whatever, to try and mix and match certain things. Sometimes it tell you people did stuff that they didn't really do. But it's great for us to see. So I just wanted to kind of use that, kind of introduce that. It's on our YouTube channel if you want to kind of look at these things again. But it's something that I think is important to do when we talk about romantic, what's going on, Greece. I mentioned Caesar. Sometimes we don't really have a picture of what we're talking about. I say the parade came from Caesar and things like that, or came from the Romans, excuse me. We don't really comprehend what we're saying. When you see, even in the Bible, it'll say in the Bible, so-and-so, and dealing with purple, and you hear the color purple, and in your mind, you don't know that purple is attached to like Saturn, or is attached to Jupiter, or is attached to, hey, in romantic times, you didn't wear purple unless you were somebody who was supposed to be like in the same regard as a god or a deist or a deity. So you'll hear these terms and you'll just be like, oh, like that doesn't make sense to me. It's weird, but it's because you're dealing with somebody who's trying to explain culture to you. Purple in their culture is huge. Now, purple in our culture was huge too. To dye it, Solomon wore purples. He dyed his clothes purple, things like that, right? But even purple You have to look at culture. Purple in one culture could be a different color entirely. You know, like their purple was really more, at least for me, I'm not always the greatest with colors. And I noticed, like, you know, you have red, brick red, burgundy, burnt this, blah, blah. Like I can't keep up with all of them. So sometimes I'll admittedly sober, right? Like, but you know, purple for them, for me, is not even what we consider to be purple, like the purple crown. It's more like a red, you know, or a reddish, somewhat maroonish sometimes even thing. But it's definitely something different, right? But purple is something that is a big deal. So when we even see in another culture, oh yeah, you're about your purples and doing this, what it's saying is oh, these are people that are trying to be above you, or people that are trying to say that they're like gods, right? So we have to be careful with these things. We have to be aware of these things. We have to, um, you know, be honest about these things, and we have to look at these things correctly. So, um, but yeah, so we thank you guys. We appreciate you. Um, we're thankful for you for tuning in today. Um, Thank you for spending some time with us. We appreciate the king and queen in each and every one of you. Even if you're not living inside that kingdom or queendom yet, we appreciate the potential king and queen in each and every one of you. I'm going to go ahead and take my leave, get ready for class tonight. And we're thankful and grateful for everybody who came on today. So thank you, thank you, thank you again. We appreciate you. Have a great day. We'll finish your night off with success. And we'll talk to you guys tomorrow, 8 a.m. Eastern New York time. Please check out, as always, my wife on TikTok, YouTube, or website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. We're trying to finish up some stuff as far as fundraising as well. We might have something where everybody can just simply help us out. We're going to go old school with it, possibly with something that everybody can help out and help us towards getting the land and making up for some of this stuff, especially as they're trying to raise the prices, excuse me, on land in different places we're looking at to get for as a community. So please, man, please, sir, just keep that in prayer and be ready. It's something easy that you can do and participate in. I'm letting my wife handle the details though. So when she tells me we're ready to go, and when the person she's working with tell me that she's ready to go, you guys will know more about it. All right. Thank you. We appreciate you. We honor you. We look forward to talking to you guys soon. And that's all I have is all, or I'm sorry, please study this word, even though we didn't crack open scriptures and stuff. Please study what we talked about today to make sure that you can be hearers of it as well as doers as well. And we're praying for you. We thank you. We honor you. And as always, it's been Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being the voice of the voices and speaking the unspoken until I have the great privilege, opportunity, and responsibility of being in front of you all again. Please remember, as always, Yashtel, that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shalom. Peace.